Eu achei muito interessante, Anat, when you showed that artwork under fire, because for me it makes me think about the importance of the working process, meaning that the final object is not that important once you have this process. And because of that, I was thinking on the wheel you showed us, because usually people are not that interested on this part. I mean, I'm comparing the process of artwork with the mitigation versus the narrative of the disaster and saving people. I would like to ask both of you, how do you see the future of our activity regarding the importance of the process, fighting with the power of the image in our society? Like the image is a finished work, right? Okay.
I think the idea of process opposed to product is something that it's really important to emphasize. We in Western society, we're so used to the final product as being the dominant factor, but actually most of the learning has to do with the process itself. And I want to mention that one of the special things of artistic hosting is that what happens is you actually follow an entire curve of a creative process, from the beginning research to evolutions that happen and dramas that happen and questions and challenges. And to really witness an artist, and I think it's the same for all creatives, but to intimately experience how a creative process evolves is something that is like a miracle. And I think that we don't have many spaces which enable that. We only have spaces that can hold merchandise or final product. But that really is the treasure, that kind of continuum, which is always surprising, the creative process and the solutions. And so I feel that there needs to be more spaces that enable that to be the focus.
For us, the process is extremely important. We spend a lot of time going through different steps that we describe as EHR co-creative process. Each of our projects has different steps. We normally start from like research that can be through a workshop, a co-creative workshop, and after is passing to the relation with the community. After it passes to find the right local partner, because we never work without local partner, because we live and they stay. And of course, after all the architectural and urban process. So there is a main process that is divided in different processes. And we try always to show the process, because have to be clear that to have a project that is succeed in the 100% or 90%, you have to involve people. And you have to make people the main image of the architecture job, architecture product. So when we present, for example, the first classroom that was built, the 100 classroom for refugee children, we said a classroom built by refugees for refugees. And we always try to not appear as a first image, because if we do this, we lost the respect of the local organization and from the people. So we lose our image, putting our image on the front. So the process is extremely, extremely key factor in our job, and I think also in a lot of architectural practice.
I would like to add a thought that has to do with recognizing that during this week, this question of process has been something that has taken kind of a new turn. Getting to know a new culture and getting to know the students at the Scola and getting to know all of you, there's something that I have found which has to do with process here, which is really unique. And when I compare it to all the different places I worked in, it seems that there's an ability to contain process in ways that are really open and very creative and with a lot of curiosity and like a maturity about process, which I actually find here. And I just want to mention that it's not an obvious thing. It's like there's a ripeness that all of the students are so involved in trying to find their own processes, a richness that has to do with process, which is quite amazing. So I feel that there's so much room to embrace that further in many ways.
I'm glad that we have this opportunity. I think this is an amazing message, a very important message for our students and for ourselves you're bringing here. And maybe I could say more. He brought a work in Palestine, and you come from Israel. I mean, we really have something here, and I have to point this. I think. Thank you, both of you. It was fantastic. Well, I have 3 questions, all of them regarding artwork. Did you, not me, did you develop this in the occupied territories? First question, but let me add something. And also, the other 2 questions are asking about how the artwork and the appreciation of art can impact the process of building the city.
So, regarding being Israeli, in this context, it's complicated. It's really a complicated political situation all over the world, and in Israel, I think maybe even more so. And there's no easy answer to that in general as Israeli citizen, how to deal with what's going on and the oppression and lack of justice, of social justice, which is extreme. Personally, what I have been able to do is conduct a research about artistic hosting in East Jerusalem, which is the occupied territories of East Jerusalem. And I've been working closely with a group of, it's actually a group of diverse professionals, a curator, activist, planner, educator, trying to think about how these ideas of artistic hosting can actually perhaps be relevant in the territories, because artistic hosting doesn't require money from an institution. I'm speaking about the idea of really using home as to take advantage of what they do have, some of them who are lucky that have homes, to ignite these kind of processes. So that's a research that is, it was part of the actually Andy Warhol curatorial fellowship that I received in 2013. A group of 7 professionals were on the table. It was a round table discourse, and we have put together some suggested policies about how could artistic hosting apply in East Jerusalem. It hasn't been fully activated beyond the kind of stage of looking into it, but hopefully it will happen later on. And as far as the second question, in the different cultural urban policies, there's a lot of emphasis on art because art brings money to the city. And I showed before the literature review of 10 years that had to do with like the very specific policies about art. So the interesting thing is that when usually art is kind of considered for branding cities, there's 4 main aspects of it. There's the kind of aspect of bringing really famous artists to the city, famous artists and architects. There's the aspect of doing festivals and biennales that can kind of bring that cultural tourism into the city. But there's also a focus on what's called artistic clusters in the city. So I think the kind of, if I'm trying to speak more directly, I think there's 3 aspects that can be relevant in this regards. First of all, in planning cities, thinking about these artistic clusters in new ways. Second, thinking about housing in new ways, because we are still basing our housing on paradigms that are no longer relevant as far as like the family unit has changed, the working conditions have changed. By 2020, there's going to be more than 55% of people working from home. Like, so many things have changed, and still we build homes in the same kind of old way, and it's no longer relevant. So I think that the whole idea of housing should be something that could accommodate new ideas, also cultural ideas. And the third thing is really the policy, cultural policy, which is, it's not so much about building, but it's building concepts.
We are trying to work with the art in Palestine. 3 months ago, we had a group of young activist artists coming from Ramallah. And they are, at the beginning, they occupied a place in Ramallah, and after they had the concession to the right to use the space, and they want to transform what was a residential building into art and cultural space. So we are trying to do it. It's extremely difficult, as the project I showed before, because we, for example, as an agency, like no-profit agency, we are not, for example, registered, and you have to have a lot of permission and stuff. So in a legislative way, it's extremely complicated to work in Palestine. But we are trying to push this through our network within Palestine and also outside. The second question was about art in cities. This year we are going to, we were invited to build, we are invited actually to build the LGBT pavilion at the Roskilde Festival. That is a very big musical festival. And the idea is to work with the art and co-creative process. And Roskilde is a kind of experimental place also for architects to after going into the city of Copenhagen. Another thing that we built, I didn't show, but like a shelter for homeless that are in Copenhagen, that are we just restore an industrial factory into a shelter place for homeless. And this was interesting because, in our team, there are engineers, architects, sociologists, anthropologists, and artists. So, this time, the idea was to create a co-creative process through art, because it was almost impossible to communicate, because everybody was from different countries and everybody would speak their own language. So, art, we would just use art as a tool.
I would like to know how you did your first contact with the community, and how much time do you spend with the locals before you do the project? How did you get to know what is important for the community? And last question, now can you raise money to do your projects?
Normally when people say where do you live, I say in the airplane. So I normally travel a lot in places, trying to create contact for with a lot of people in different countries. For this reason, I wanted to show different places where we are working, because this network is a key element to enter inside the country at the beginning. So you have to have contact in high level and in low level. For example, to go to build in a country and to not get stopped by Secret Service and blah, 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 you have to have eye contact. And to get to the community, you have to have the right contact to the leader of the community. The problem is when, for example, in the Middle East, where the community is based on a lot of extremely different tribes. So basically, you have to go house by house, as they do the evangelists, You go house by house to the community leader and talk with them. Try to understand what is the common problem and try to bring all together, give to them exactly the same time to speak So there is not anyone on the top of each other, and try to talk about this before to the male in some country, after to the women. Normally, the right information are coming from the women. So, but we have to engage also the men. So this is normally how we get to know the community. So it's a lot of traveling, a lot of discussion, and a lot of time spent much before. For this reason, I was saying before, the process is extremely, extremely important. And to get the people involved in the project before to do a nice sketch. The second one, we raise money all the time. This is the main problem. Normally, there are 3 different ways from where we get money. One way is together with the big organization that they are contract us to do the job that they don't want or they don't know how to do because they are very busy in bureaucracy. The second one is through application to foundation. So there is a sector of the organization that is continuously apply for money. And the third one is to individual money and campaign. For us, for example, the one that I showed before, and I show also for this reason, to try to make the people also involved through finance. The other way we fund the project is through workshop. As I was saying, workshop 1+1 = 11, when we invite young people to build with us. We teach about theoretical lecture on the humanitarian emergency and architecture, to work and build together with us in the same context. And the money that they pay to have this experience is directly invested in the project in itself. So you have to try to be creative to find money. It's not simple. Actually, it's the most difficult thing. All the other is just fun.
I would like to add to this question of creating relationships and how does one approach a community. I think it's something that many times is that kind of art of nurturing relationships and learning about the local setting and on a very deep and personal way is a kind of skill which is often overseen. In architecture and urban planning, there's a lot of community participation, and often that's a very shallow approach in which the community is there and it makes everybody feel good, but it's not really about honesty and a real understanding of the everyday life challenges and hopes. And I want to emphasize the fact that I think that artists are amazing in doing that. Artists who are oriented towards social-based art and relational art. The kind of processes that unfold in being able to enter almost like a subconscious of a community, I think that's one of the roles that artists take. It's also something that we felt here this week. To some extent, coming to exercises we had to do with building at Paim Street. And the work that Lancionetti has been doing there, and with the help of Paola, which I get to thank now also, and Todd, there's such a richness that it has been created there with the complexities, but still it's something that takes time to develop and has to do with trust and has to do with entering layers that are not always available. Well,
we'll have a new question here. For both of you, I think, regarding the tendency of the growth of the right wing on politics and the relationship of this preference with art and urban rights and, why not, human rights. The question is how to deal with this new scenario where we have this tendency for the right wing, and how to keep the humanitarian projects and organization of social rights, how could they survive on this new environment?
We have to resist to this wave of rights influence, but resist with what we know what to do, no? So we as architects, we have to resist through our architecture. So people that are working with art have to resist through art. Politicians have to resist through politics. But it's more about the people that care. We have to gather together and work together if we want a real change. Because it's so strong what's happening at the moment that it's impossible to change anything if we are working alone. Impossible. Even in a financial way, like we cannot compete. In terms of human rights, we just have to teach to people. Learning and communication and education are three extremely important levels to resist to this wave. And we have to use the right word. So when we are talking, when in Europe they are talking about wave, of tsunami, they are all extremely negative words to describe a phenomenon that are the refugees that was always existing. The people were always in the move. The problem that now they just come into Europe. But we are talking about 1 million of people on 500 million of people. Lebanon is like 60% of the population are refugees. Amman, 70% of the population are Palestinian. 70%. So when we are talking about, we have to give the right answer and the right information to people. Because people are lazy. They don't like to read the rights. They just want to hear. And social media, of course, influence a lot in the moment. Before was the television, before the radio, blah, blah, blah. But it's always the same. So just we have to gather together. The finally answer is gather together with different professionals, the people that care. We have to resist to this.
I think we know that we're living in a time where it's an antisocial situation of neoliberalism in general, but also with the right wing, where it's against society in many ways, and we don't really realize how corrupt it is. We want to, let's say, resist. We want to create some kind of counter reaction, but who is resisting? And here I think is a more complicated aspect where these systems have been ingrained into how we think in such a deep way. They really have taken our independence and our imagination and our individuality, and that is something that's so hard to fight. So there's a process of really trying to go through an undoing of self into deep questions of identity, of freedom, of civil action as something that's human, of humanity really. And it's not that available actually. So that's one process which I think is really important, and again the role of art as an amazing language to do that. And as far as ways of doing that kind of reaction, I think that this revolution of the domestic sphere, the domestic turn, is something that can be a real possibility. It's no longer about the public spaces. It's no longer about protesting. It doesn't help. We've seen in the last 2014 and on, there's so many huge revolts that kind of were just like millions of people on the streets. Nothing really happened in result to that. So finding new strategies where really the public terrain is so polluted and finding ways to act within the domestic terrain which can enable a new result. And that also has to do with subaltern publics that take place within home and subaltern citizenship.
Guys, thank you very much for your presentation, your lecture today, for the answers. Obrigado, gente. Boa noite.